Hello, my friends, my oil-loving friends. In this time, what I want to do is share with you about my top picks for essential oils for kids that are having trouble sleeping. And by the way, everything that I'm saying could be applied to adults, but it's worthwhile for us to dedicate this conversation to kids because, of course, then some of the examples that I give will be specific to children. In Chinese medicine, which is what my background is in, Chinese medicine is so brilliant as a medical system and a philosophical system. And there's a lot of very specific differentiation that comes into play in relationship to basically diagnosing and treating insomnia or trouble sleeping. And what that means in like basic terms is that there are many different pathways and reasons behind sleeplessness. And when I put reasons in quotes, only because in Chinese medicine, and again, this is one of the things that I love about it, is that it doesn't look at diagnoses as strict linear cause and effect like we do in Western philosophy and Western medicine, because it's always looking at the nature of the dynamic relationship of things. So when we diagnose in Chinese medicine, we're diagnosing the dynamic relationship of things. And we're actually looking at where is the place within this dynamic relationship that it makes the most sense to enter and sort of tweak in order to create more balance and more harmony. So that's the context for this conversation. And I'm going to, I'll pick three. We're gonna explore three different again, reasons or nature of imbalance in relationship to sleeplessness with children. And again, this can be applied to adults. So one that is actually really common for children, and oftentimes adults won't even think about it this way because we don't think about it with ourselves actually, is that sleeplessness and trouble with sleeping in children can, especially when they're younger and they're growing rapidly, it can be directly connected to their digestion. For children, there's an enormous amount of energy that goes into the digestion of food, and when I say digestion, I mean all the way into building the human that is your child or the child. I had a call come in. Looks like I'm still recording. Okay. So if there's a challenge in digestion with the kiddo, meaning they're eating too much, they're not digesting well, they're not breaking down their food very well, anything that has to do with digestion that's a struggle, that's off, it can translate into sleeplessness when it comes to nighttime. Now, furthermore, to make it a little bit more complex, just like with adults, oftentimes with children, the digestive challenges are typically directly related to the mind and to emotions, in that when we ruminate or run things over and over again, like a worry type pattern, we deplete digestive qi. I didn't used to think that children worried, and I actually don't think that they worry up until a certain age. In the classic Chinese literature, it says that it's not until a child is age 7 that it has the emotional complexity and the development of ego to officially sort of worry. I question that now. You know, times are different than when these texts were written, and I do believe in my patient population, because for many years I was treating kids of all ages. I believe that I would start to see what I would call worry in a child around age 5 in these modern times. So if a child is 6, if a child is 7, if a child is 8, there's a very good chance that they could be worrying about something. The interesting thing is that they don't generally articulate it like we would as an adult. And even as adults, I think a lot of times we're kind of clueless to worrying, especially for those of us that do it often, because it's just part of our operating system, and it feels like us, Worrying to an adult can feel like us actually doing something about something, but we're not actually doing anything about anything, and we're just depleting our chi and affecting our digestion. But we don't even know that we're worrying because it feels like we're just being a well-meaning, thoughtful, considerate human being that's chewing things over. So the definition of worry in Chinese medicine is basically when we repeat a thought form over and over again and we don't take action on it. So if a thought form is kicking around in your head over and over and you're not taking action on it, then that's a worry. And the action can simply be, I'm going to table this question. I'm going to table this unknown that I'm worried about until tomorrow, until the next day, until I X, Y, and Z. That would be doing something about it as well. So for children, what I notice is that it often takes the form of them attempting to digest, this is really important, of them attempting to digest fear or some other strong sublimated emotion in the family field that's not being dealt with by the parents. And oftentimes for the parents, it's because they don't even know that they have it, or they have it and they kind of know, but they're trying to deal with it and cover it up because they're supposed to be parents and they're modeling well for their children. I've found repeatedly that if the parent simply shares with the child, hey, mom and dad, or mom and mom, or dad and dad are feeling some intensity right now because of XYZ, fill in the blank. We wanted to share this with you. Again, this is going to be dependent on the age of the kid and you would have to select your language, but it's being transparent with the fact that there's a challenge in the family field, and that the guardians, the parental figures, are doing their best to handle it, but it is challenging even them, and that they want the child to know that they're safe and they're going to be taking care of them and everything's okay, and that they can talk to them about what they need to. That diffuses the energy so that the child doesn't unconsciously try to digest what the parent isn't digesting. So let's contrast that to something arising in the family where, say it's financial fear. This is a very common one, and I know this one well. If there's financial fear in the family field, oh no, is there going to be enough money? Do we have enough money to pay for this? Or is it going to lose a job? Is there going to be all this, right? Maybe they're not saying a word to the kid. Maybe they're super discreet if there's two people raising the child. They fight elsewhere. They're not even fighting or arguing or bringing this up in front of the child. But the energy of it is present because it can't not be. You can't hide that. It exists within the family field. And because a family field forms its own entity unto itself, that energy has to be dealt with. All energy has to be reconciled. This is important. All energy has to be reconciled. And so children, especially sensitive ones, they will take it on. And I've seen this in family units with up to 8 children, where the various children will be metabolizing, if you will, and digesting different untended to emotions in the family field. So, take a sip of tea. This is going to have to be part 1, I can tell, so it doesn't get too much longer. Part 1. Sleeplessness from challenged digestion, which can include the attempts to digest and metabolize emotions within the family field that may or may not be directly coming from the child itself. One of the best point and oil combos that I know for this is Roman chamomile diluted. Monara.org, which I'm the director of education for, has a wonderful, wonderful kit called the Blue Dolphin Kit of Essential Oils for Kids. And it has the top 12 oils that I found to be most helpful for kids, all in proper dilution for use directly on the child for single points. Roman chamomile is in that kit. It's properly diluted. If you're going to dilute it yourself, I would take it to a 10%. And you take a drop of the diluted Roman chamomile and place it over the belly button of the child before bedtime, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 15 minutes, maybe even when they're in bed, laying there, and you're tucking them in. And you're not sticking your finger down in their belly button, you're just holding it right over the belly button itself, very lightly. And you can see what comes to you to do. You might breathe together, you might gaze into each other's eyes. I would refrain from using too many words, and perhaps, the idea would be to be in relative silence. And it can be anywhere from 30 seconds for a child up to a couple of minutes, depending on the child. And you will feel that there's some kind of process that's been initiated, and you'll also have a knowing or a sense when to release. Sometimes when I'm treating kids, it's just that they just can't sit still anymore, and that's when it releases, and that might be the case. Roman chamomile is called the nourishing protector. And we often think about nourishment connected to the mother or to the mother archetype. There's also a kind of nourishment that comes from the father or the father archetype that has to do with providing the protection so that there's safety within the household. So I'm going to break this down a little bit more here, because there is a lot arising at this time within the collective consciousness around gender identity and gender roles. And what I'm talking about here, it transcends those identities, but it does directly connect to them at the same time. So the best way to describe it is like this. If we were to look back in history to times of tribal consciousness and tribal existence, there were very specific roles that a woman and a man would act out of. But here's the interesting thing. They were direct extensions. Those roles were direct extensions of biology and the nature of existence at that time. The strong may go and hunt. When I say strong, I'm generally referring to a man, not because women aren't strong, but because generally a human that's born as a man with male genitalia is going to also have male hormones, which tend to make the muscles stronger. It's very directly biological. A woman has a uterus, and through the uterus, the child gestates and is born. And there's a vulnerability after the child is born for both the mother and the child. So after the child is born, and again, imagine in tribal times, after the child is born, and there's the vulnerability of both the infant and the mother who's recovering, there is a certain degree of protection that's needed for both of them. The food needs to be delivered to them. There needs to be safekeeping around them from predators, from animals, from predators that may come in the form of other humans, for example. So this role of the male being the protector and perhaps the provider of some meat, and the female being the one to deliver the baby and have the vulnerability in physicality as she's healing and mending, and the infant to be the infant in its totally dependent state. Those are all biological mandates. There's no psychological confusion in there. Now fast forward to the times that we are in now, where we're trying to break down gender identity and gender role for good reason, because there's been layers upon layers of conditioning that really, much of it doesn't really make sense anymore. It's time for us to break down walls to discover what's true and what we want to create. Nevertheless, within the energy body and within the psyche of our being, we both crave and need the energies of protection from both what we might call masculine and feminine sources of energy, or the yin and the yang. And while the feminine has more to do with receptivity, the yin yielding receptive, the sweet nourishment of mother's milk, the masculine has to do with this protective force, with structure, with the house, with the protecting, with physical force if needed. Children need to feel both energies around them and in their body for certain things. Let's put it this way. This is the most accurate way. There is a almost primordial calming to the nervous system of children that comes from having online within them, and to some degree around them, reflected back to them, the energies of both nourishment and protection that are feminine in nature and nourishment and protection that are masculine in nature. Now, that doesn't mean that every child has to have a double parent household. Absolutely not. Because within each of us, we have the masculine and the feminine. That's true. And one of the most direct ways that I know to access this beautiful, harmonious relationship between the masculine and the feminine in relationship to protection is through Roman Chamomile, the nourishing protector. It's so just stunningly balanced between this movement between the masculine and feminine in relationship to the energetic and felt sense of protection. So when it's used on the belly button, which is the source of original nourishment from our mother, and it has this energetic of a strong masculine protective force, it engenders and activates both of those energies within the child. And there's a deep peace that can come over them at bedtime because of that. Additionally, Roman Chamomile is such a powerful digestive aid, and we know it to be very calming for the stomach, calming for digestion, calming for worry. And so there's also these benefits too. So Roman Chamomile, the nourishing protector on CV8 on the belly button, diluted properly. I'd love to hear what you got from this. If you want to put it in the comments, like the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And I'm so happy to be here with you right now. Until next time, from my heart to yours.